You're listening to the Music Tech Teacher podcast, episode number 61. Welcome to the Music Tech Teacher podcast. Music tech tips, lesson ideas, advice, news, and interviews, especially for music teachers. Brought to you by midnightmusic.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast. I'm Katie Wardrobe, a music technology and education trainer, speaker and consultant from midnightmusic.com.au. In this episode, I talk with David Bennett, who is a teacher from Overnewton Anglican Community College in Melbourne, Australia. For a number of years, David has been working on remixing projects with his music tech students in Years 7 through to Year 10. And over that time, he's been refining the process and adjusting the projects to incorporate music theory skills as well as technology-based skills. He likes to keep things fresh by using current music with the students. We talk about where Dave finds audio stems for the remixing projects, the software he uses with different year levels, and the process the students use to create their remixes. As usual, you can find the links to all of the things we talk about on the show notes page for this episode at midnightmusic.com.au/61. I'm pleased to welcome music teacher David Bennett to the podcast. David is a fellow Melburnian who studied at Monash University and currently teaches at Overnewton Anglican Community College, which is in Melbourne's northwest. Dave teaches students from Year 5 up to Year 10, and he says he was always a Windows fan until he met his first Mac. Sounds like a romantic date. Dave and I discovered recently that we're mutual fans of the internet-famous singer and instrumentalist Jacob Collier. He managed to see Jacob perform at a gig in Melbourne earlier this year, and Dave said that his brain melted as a result. So welcome, David.
Hey, Katie, how are you?
Not too bad. So I was presenting a session at a conference in Melbourne here, and you were there in the audience of my session, and I happened to use Jacob Collier as an example of a multi-track split-screen video kind of thing that I was talking about, and then you came up afterwards and said, yeah, I just saw him perform like 2 days ago, which I couldn't believe. I did not even know Jacob was in Australia at all, and, you know, that he was doing gigs and stuff. So Tell everybody else, for those that don't know who Jacob Collier is, tell them what he does and what was the gig like.
I think he is ridiculously he's got the most perfect pitch I've ever sort of encountered. Like he's a wunderkind sort of kid from the UK. I think he's about 23.
Yeah.
His mum's a muso, and he started doing videos, those picture-in-picture ones that you were talking about. Of him singing these rearrangements of like Quincy Jones and these lots of Stevie Wonder.
Yeah. So
maybe when he's 18, so maybe 5 years ago, and these videos just started getting some traction. He's a real sort of muso because he does like things that I can't even fathom.
Ridiculous things. I know. Yeah. I think these microtonal harmony,
modulation. So he changes from like A440, or he starts at A like 430 and then moves to A440 gradually across, 16 bars or something. But he does it in this way that is just, it's so dense and like it's really like delicious sort of stuff.
Yeah,
it's mind blowing. Hence, my brain melted, and I don't understand so much of what he's doing.
No, he's one of those ridiculous prodigy type people. He's just truly phenomenal. And the thing that I'd found, I don't think I played it in the session, but the thing I found after I'd put my presentation together was a series that he was doing of reharmonizations of little snippets that people were sending through. And they send through like, I harm you, it's called, which sounds like a, domestic violence thing, but it's actually harmonise, I harmonise you. Yeah. And, people send him random, just a little snippet of melody, something they've made up or something, I don't know. And then he harmonises it in the most phenomenal way where you go, I would never have solved that harmonic issue like that. It's just mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. So I'm really glad you got to see him. At least someone did, not me. But
it was weird. The Melbourne gigs, I think he did 2 at Howler, which isn't a big venue in Brunswick, but the Sydney gigs he'd done, the night before, and he was at the basement, which I think is a much sort of bigger venue. So I'm not sure how last minute, or I think it was the first time he'd been here. So the guys that he sort of, like not his entourage, but his tour manager, I suppose, and the guy who comes and sets up his amazing sort of, his live sound is silly because he does that silly sort of sets up 10 sort of instruments and just runs.
Yeah.
He's super, like he's got this infectious sort of energy, which I thought would be really, a little naff, but it was actually really fun. And it was, like sort of cheekily pretentious, what I mean? It wasn't, because at the end of the day, he's just ridiculous. So he can get away with that sort of, it's not arrogant, but, dancing, or sprinting from the piano, this ridiculous, like, 8-note chord voice sort of reharmonization of a Beatles tune, and then he sprints over to a double bass and busts out this stupid groove. And so, it comes across a little silly, but anyway, so he came out, and I guess they were sort of dipping their toe in the water, sort of testing how big he was, because I suppose it's hard to know.
Yeah, it'd be very hard to know. And hopefully he comes back. Yeah, I'll definitely.
Well, I think when he comes back, more people will know, and I think it'll be at a much bigger venue.
Yeah.
I mean, it was great. Underground. It was small, but it was kind of, wow, hey, do you know that? Like, no way. And suddenly some people knew about the gig, and then,
filled out. Unbelievable. Phenomenal. So tell us about your role at the school that you're teaching at Overnewton. I know that you've got a bit of a music tech focus there, but I'm sure you're doing other things too. So tell us about what year levels are you teaching there?
Sure. So the school's a PD Year 12 school, and I teach from Year 5, which is the start of middle school. So I take performing arts, which is dance, drama, music for the year. At Year 6, there's like a band program and some more dance and drama. And then at 7 and 8, so the upper middle years, we turn to electives. And there I'm taking 2 music, so a music performance subject, which is classroom music, that runs for a semester, and a music tech elective that runs for a semester as well. And then I also do that at Year 9, music tech, which is kind of cool because we move from GarageBand to Logic Pro. And then at Year 10, we have a music elective as well, which is music tech, and again, Logic Pro, but the time allocation is much larger. So I see those kids 9 times a fortnight. So it's, we can get a lot
more
done.
Scope. Yeah. And the ones that are, when they're in Year 7 and 8 and they've got those 2 types of music class options, are students able to do both if they want to? Are they one after the other, or are they timetabled at this? Oh, no, they can't be if you're teaching them both.
True.
Sorry.
There's other staff members who, can take the subjects at the same time. But across 7 and 8, there's 4 semesters, obviously, and if the kids wish to, they can do one of each. So in an ideal world, with timetabling, class sizes and room allocation, a kid would be able to do, dance, drama, music performance and music tech across the 2 years. And then at Year 9, where they move to a separate campus, they can, choose their focus there. But sometimes they might do one of the musics twice, which is kind of cool too. It does make it a little interesting though. At Year 8, I might have a class of 26 kids in music tech, and we're doing some sort of rudimentary sort of simple GarageBand sort of arrangement stuff, say, or just learning how to use the interface. And I might have some kids who have done it in Year 7. So I have a bit more nous. But we're also we have a lab of desktop like iMacs, but we've only got 15. So it's a 1-to-2 sort of ratio. So the kids are always working in pairs, which is, a blessing and a curse, I suppose. Wonderful. A lot of staff will know, sometimes that can be sort of a little problematic. Some kids might coast a little and be sort of, chauffeur-driven through, the project because they're just sort of
buddied up with someone who knows.
And, they've been really clever and just buddied up with that kid who,
done it already.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. One of the music theory kids who knows how to, do so much of the stuff already.
And I know with the older students, because we were talking about when we caught up about the remixing projects that you've been doing, and I'd love to go into lots of detail with that today. I know a lot of people are interested in doing that with their own students, and I've kind of worked out a method of the way that I approach it. I'd love to know if yours is similar or the same or totally different maybe. But that's something you've been doing more with, is it the upper, middle and senior kind of students? Is that more,
absolutely.
The older ones? Yep.
I found that because I've been doing it for a few years, and my colleagues and I always needed to refine how we deliver sort of the techniques or the content, like the order sequentially, given that some kids have done it in year 7. Some haven't. Some are new to the school. Some are kind of new to max. Some have, they're grade 6 A, M, E, B, violin or something. So these kids already have, at least grade 4 theory. So it's a little challenging, I suppose, and we're always refining and changing things. But I think if we start with what we call an original composition, which is can be built on loops essentially, you can sort of introduce the kids to the interface and where things live. They can learn how to build by sort of, just dragging loops in. Obviously, we can talk about form, layering sounds, complementary sounds there. And if they're only using loops, GarageBand's so user-friendly. I mean, that's one of the most attractive things about it. Most of the loops, if you set the key, will work wonderfully together in a really creative, sort of interesting way. And then we can introduce, some inputting, via a MIDI keyboard, some original loops, or starting with, say, a drum, just a kick and a snare, because then you've got quantizing and it's just the propensity for failure is huge if you don't sort of have bite-sized sort of pieces of info that make sense in the order that they're delivered, because otherwise it can be really overwhelming and you'll end up with kids that just are unable to sort of even entertain the idea of something like automation, because they're still learning the difference between the left-hand side and the right-hand side, or the blue ones and the green ones.
And I love that idea. I like that idea too of starting off with loops just to introduce concepts and that sort of thing too. And then it's great. Obviously, you want to get away from that and onto original stuff as quickly as you can. But it's such a great way. I think you always want to create that sense of success for kids, straight up, and then it sounds good and they've achieved something really good, and it's not, sounding awful and crappy and they're put off by the whole thing. So I like that approach too, and then moving on from that to more original stuff maybe. But the remixing projects, so just tell us about the basic kind of the reason you do that, and maybe the basic kind of overview of the concept for the project, and then we'll get stuck into the nitty gritty, because I know people love to know that sort of thing about what are the steps taken and that type of thing. But the overall concept, obviously, you're using some stems, which are for those that don't know, stems are existing audio tracks from someone else's composition, and they're usually original tracks of some sort. So it might be the vocal line only from a Bruno Mars song, or it might be the vocal line only from Stevie Wonder or something like that, or instrumental tracks it could be. And stems tend to be isolated instrumental tracks or vocal tracks where everything's divided up. It's not all mixed together in the song format. So I'm taking it that you're finding stems as a first step. Is that right?
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things I sort of found was sourcing really good quality.
Yeah, totally.
I primarily use a cappella files too. So there are some artists will release for remix comps, say. I remember I was still at uni. Silverchair had a competition they were running with Triple J where they released the stems for one of their tracks from Diorama, and I was so into that album.
I loved that album too. Silverchair's an Australian band for those that are overseas.
And it was Tuna and the Brine, which is this epic sort of, I won't go into it. It's an amazing song. And so that was released for free on the Triple J website, and you could do whatever you wanted. And I was sort of fiddling with FL Studio then, I think. and had no idea what I was doing, but found it so exciting that these stems, you could actually get them. It wasn't, you weren't stealing them from some dodgy, torrent site. They were
Russian
there,
website.
yeah, sort of signing your soul away, or infecting your computer.
That's what I always worry about, infecting my computer.
There's pristine files, and these are the it was just the guitar. It blew my mind. Anyway, long story short, that was many moons ago, and now there's lots of royalty-free sites. Well, I shouldn't say lots, but I've found some. I've had some success in getting some really high-quality, say, vocal files of songs that the kids are listening to, not songs that the kids' parents have listened to.
Tell me,
sometimes the case.
Here's this cool Beatles track, and everyone's like, "What? Who are they?" Tell us about those websites, because I've also found this issue over the years, and when people ask me, I suggest remix competitions, because there's a few websites which do proper remix competitions, like they're really actually legit. The artist and their record company have allowed the use of a song, and I find they come and go quite quickly. Once the competition's over, the stems are removed from the website. So you kind of need to keep an eye on it and get them when you can. And then I feel like this is good, because I always want to do the right thing by copyright and teach the kids that too. So I think it's really good to do things properly where you can. And there's always that question of copyright. If you do stuff within the four walls of your classroom and it doesn't go anywhere outside your classroom, I believe that it's okay even to use copyrighted material, but I'm not necessarily into encouraging that with the kids. I don't know. It's a hard one, but trying to find copyright things that you're allowed to use, royalty-free or Creative Commons licensed, is a good way to go, I think. So where have you gone at part? So tell us the actual websites. I'll list these in the show notes for those listening as well, and we'll put links and stuff.
The copyright issue is
a big thing.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and it's meant that things could be really limiting, I suppose. Unless, of course, you're just using, I find that if I'm using a vocal that is on a remix sort of site, obviously I can do anything with that because it's been uploaded with the intention of people not just sort of learning how to manipulate an audio file or add a drum beat that, is at 106 BPM and therefore, you can sync it and it works lovely. But yeah, they've actually put it there for the intention of people to remix it and therefore gain more traction maybe, or, hopefully maybe push their product a little more, which is, fantastic. It works for both sort of parties. The Creative Commons thing has been, it's been fantastic too, but the struggle I sort of had was with, maybe not a struggle, but what I wanted to do was keep the kids engaged. So keep the content fresh, and that sounds really cheesy, but the nature of these kids that are streaming music, they're not listening to albums, for months anymore. They're listening to playlists, and, artists are so passé so quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I find that which is another thing entirely, has meant that the kids really they changed the songs that they're listening to so regularly that to keep them engaged, I've found it's been beneficial to change the songs that we use, and maybe only work on a vocal for 4 weeks, or maybe even less, because soon enough, depending on how much time the kids have got with their headphones on work on the project, they're just going to find it a little too much. It's no longer something they're listening to, and now they want to work on this. And so you're balancing, not this sort of attention deficit sort of thing where they're puppy dogs and they're jumping around at different squirrels, but getting enough out of that vocal, say, to then move to something else and for it to have been worthwhile, but at the same time making sure that it's current. And so by current, I found a site years ago called Acapellas 4, numeral 4,
number 4, yep.
.co.uk, and found that I don't use it anymore. It had a new sort of look. I don't know, the website changed completely, and for some reason I just found that it wasn't as brilliant anymore for sourcing vocals that I could use in the classroom to show kids how to,
I have a feeling they had a little copyright issue at some point. I might be wrong about that. I'm not sure. I might be wrong. I may be thinking of another website, but maybe.
I've since found msprojectsound.com.
Oh, I do not know that one.
Yeah. And this is, so far, absolutely brilliant. They have loads and loads of current songs featuring the vocal file and the instrumental most of the time. They list the BPM and it's usually really accurate.
Oh, that's good. We'll get onto that in a minute. I want to talk a bit more about that, but we'll save it for a second.
They've got the key and I think I like it a lot so far.
And do you think is it legal? Because the problem with stems, for those who haven't delved into this world before, when you go searching for stems, you can find things really easily, famous songs. And then the question, is it actually a legal upload to the website that you're getting it from? Or is it just someone's found it and uploaded it without the artist's permission or, created it themselves maybe? Do you feel like that one is a legal one? I haven't looked at this one before. Yeah, look,
I do. I wouldn't use something that I thought was dodgy. And, to be honest, I really don't know. It's a really well-maintained site. It's not buggy. There's no disclaimer that says, that all of these artists, because it's got hundreds of tunes on it. And it's scarily sort of current. The songs, right. The top 10 sort of iTunes tunes are there quite regularly.
I'm going to check it out, definitely.
They're really clean. There's a lot of sites where there used to be this process that people would get an instrumental version of a song and they'd use, I can't really explain it. I wish I understood this process. I tried it once and it didn't work. But they'd put one out of phase. So they'd use, I think it's called phase cancellation, where they'd use an instrumental version of a song at the same time in a project with the normal song, the song with the vocal. And using phase cancellation, it would sort of cancel out the instrumental audio. And, of course, it was too good to be true. I don't think would ever work with a pristine vocal.
It's not a clean copy.
And so, sometimes you'll find a vocal and there might be a snare hiding sometimes in between, a verse or in the intro or between sections of the song. And that's really helpful and valuable because, if it's not interfering with the vocal, you can edit it out, but it'll help you beat match. And you can, if it's in the wave, you can throw the wave up on the screen and show the kids this little transient here, this little bump is lining up with those bars.
Yeah.
How amazing that we can now,
use that as an anchoring point.
In time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Instead of running around and, sort of slightly dragging the vocal to the left a little for every kid with a different song. That's really
hard work. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a great way to teach.
Just before we leave websites, in Darba, do you use that one at all? Which is they run a lot of remix competitions and kind of well-known.
One time, so I'll write it down.
Okay, I'll add that to the show notes too. So that's one I've looked at before. You need to sign up. I think you can sign up for a free account initially, and you're allowed to download, this is what it used to be. You can download your first set of stems at no cost, and then if you want to continue, I think there's a subscription basis, but that one's really good because that's official remix competitions run by record companies and that sort of thing, and so you can go in there and just grab the stems when they're there. The remix competition will run and end perhaps, but I try to keep what I can if I'm looking for stems to grab. But it's a case of kind of visiting regularly or staying on their mailing list so that you get notified about things. But they have really, really well-known artists on there, and then some, not so well-known, but really great stuff on there. So, so I've been there quite a few times. Things like Bruno Mars and Rihanna and, those sorts of people. So that's useful. So any other websites before we leave that for stems?
No, not for stems.
Yeah. All right. That's really good though. I think, it's really useful to have a couple to send people to. So I'd love you to talk through the stems once you've downloaded the stems. So here's the thing. If a kid wants to use one of these stems, and let's just say it's a vocal, just a vocal track for some song, and if they want to put that into GarageBand or Logic and then add drum beats to it, they want to add their own bass line to it and so on. The problem often is that the stem itself, it's in a tempo, but sometimes the tempo is not, exactly the same through the entire song. So the problem happens, when if anyone's ever tried this, you will know what I'm talking about. When you drag the vocal stem in, you decide to drag a drum loop in, let's say, from the loop library, and then you extend the drum loop out for the duration of the song. And at some point it starts to kind of get out of time with each other because the stem is, it's been played by musicians in a studio and they're maybe not playing along to a click track. So it's not precisely in time. So the thing that you can do in some software programs is to beat map the stem, and you apply information to the vocal stem, which means that it will snap into place. It will snap to bar lines and that sort of thing, and extend and contract and stay in time with any loops that you drag in. So to do that, you kind of need software that will allow you to do it, and you can do that in Logic but not in GarageBand, I think, from memory.
Yep.
Yeah. So are you doing that for the kids? Are you getting the kids to do that? Because it's actually a fantastic musical exercise in itself, just sitting there beat mapping stems and working out. So you kind of want to start off with what is the overall kind of beats per minute for the stem? I mean, that's the place I start. And you go, okay, I used to do this as an example in workshops with the Gautier stems for Somebody That I Used to Know, which were released for a competition. And you'd put it in, and if you had the whole song in there, the whole vocal stem, it's kind of at 127 beats per minute, but it's 127 point something.
Yeah.
And it's not the same the entire way. It might sort of be 128 at some point and 127.3 at some point. So it's a great exercise to go through and to beat map the whole thing. So tell me what's your process with the kids?
I sort of don't have... I completely agree that the process is so informative. It's brilliant. It can be a little boring to some kids, I suppose, that sort of concept, but others will really run with that idea of being able to see the transients and shifting them to the left and to the right, via the BPM counter. But yeah, GarageBand only does whole numbers, Logic does sort of decimals, and Logic has this BPM counter where you can run this little, it's a plugin, an audio plugin that you can run on your vocal track, and it will sort of do the work for you, and we'll do it to, decimals. But we really don't, I find that we don't have time to sort of, which sounds terrible, but it's something that we can't really focus on. I can with, same way, my year 10s, we've got a lot more time with, more than twice the amount of time that the littler kids are getting. So yeah, it's much easier to only have, if we choose to work on a song, I've found that for the last few years, so many of these pop musicians, I suppose, are working to a whole number.
Yeah.
And, often you can sort of say, let's start with 128 because it's a house vocal or something, you're fine. But if it's like an actual real music, if it's a band that, aren't playing to a click necessarily, and that sort of happened some years ago where it was actually fun because one of the ways to counter that is obviously to cut the vocals.
Yeah.
And so I can really have the kids attack this remixing task in a different way where I'm not giving them a whole, 3.5 minutes of 106 BPM and saying, play in D minor. The kids can, they need to reorder the song and take different vocal phrases.
Yeah.
And maybe that means that they don't need to sort of follow the structure of the original song because they've moved, just a grab, just like a riff or a hook, sort of a hook vocal that they're using. And that's sort of a remixing that they understand too. We don't need to, it's not reharmonizing like Collier's doing where we don't touch the vocal, but we create, 20 different tracks underneath, and look what we're doing.
Yeah.
Obviously, yeah, that's impossible for so many of the kids. But if they want to just rearrange the vocal, that's fantastic, and it means it sort of negates that issue without a whole number of a project.
Yeah. I've taken that approach too. I like that idea. I used to call it creating a palette of sound. So you'd take the long stem for the song, and then just chop it up, and then you end up with, I've got this little snippet and this little snippet, and you might choose maybe four different snippets from the entire song, and each snippet might be just 2 bars or 4 bars long, and then those are the things you're then going to use in your remix somehow. So and that works really well. Like you said, even if you do need to beat map those things or shift the audio, contract it or stretch it out or whatever, it's only a couple of bars at a time, not like you said, a 3-minute song, which can be painful.
And you've got those kids then that they won't place the vocal. I mean, so many vocals might start on the second beat of the first bar.
Yeah.
Other than the first beat. Or, even there's a dotted crotchet rest at the start of the bar before the vocals come in. And the things that the kids can come up with is just really creative, because they might, whether or not they're aware that they're doing it incorrectly, they might place the vocal on a downbeat where actually it's sort of syncopated, and they really do create something original because they've placed it incorrectly, and yet it's sort of one of those cool sort of happy accidents.
Yeah. This episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast is brought to you by the Midnight Music Community. The Midnight Music Community is an online space for music teachers who'd like help using technology in their music lessons. There are online courses, video tutorials, lesson plans, music tech news, and professional development certificates are provided for any training that you undertake. I'm inside the community every day, personally answering members' questions and sharing tips and ideas. The best thing is that you get to connect with hundreds of other music teachers just like you and share your own experiences and occasional music tech frustrations. For more information and a special joining price just for the listeners of this podcast, visit midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. That's midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. After that, are they the accompanying tracks that they're creating, the instrumental tracks, is this things that they're playing in themselves with software instruments, or are they using loops, or is it a combination maybe?
Combination. Sometimes with the rubrics I use with the kids, I'll actually stipulate that they must use X amount of the greens, which, and by the greens I mean an original software instrument loop.
Yeah.
So MIDI. That is theirs. They haven't dragged from the browser, because obviously the browser's got audio and MIDI loops already there. And as sort of they go up in the year levels, I sort of expect that the students will use more original content. They want to anyway. The older they get, the less they want to sort of rely on. I think I've got, like, if I download all of the library content in Logic, there's something like 25,000 different loops.
That's crazy.
Which is ridiculous, 60 gig or something. It's amazing, and it's sort of option paralysis at the same time.
Absolutely.
I mean, then you start talking about using the filters that GarageBand and Logic both have, so that you can refine your search. But obviously, I might, like, if I talk about the process, sometimes it's easier just to have a work in progress file that I give the kids, where I've actually using Drummer, say, I've changed the project key and the tempo so that it's accurate, and I've placed the vocal where I might place the vocal, so give them an 8-bar intro, put in an arrangement track if I want. Sometimes the kids want to change the form of the song, but if I put in 8 bars of nothing, just 8 bars of drums, and then place the vocal for them, you've got the kids then that can straight away change the drummer, and they say, no, we are not using, this.
Do you deliberately choose a really irritating one? So they go, sir, we are totally not using that one.
Isn't that terrible? It depends on my mood. Yeah, it's not horrible. I'm very immature. Sometimes something that, more often than not, something that the kids sort of generally will agree is something that they can leave, I suppose. Because if you click on that loop, they might maintain that, that fake session drummer that, they've said is going to play, the style of music, or they can use the little XY. The XY controller is amazing.
Yeah.
With the loud and soft and the simple and complex.
Yeah. So in GarageBand and Logic, for those that are not Mac users or don't use the software, there's this drummer idea. It's like a ready-made drum track that you can add, but it's a little bit dynamic. You can have some control over the way the drums sound, and you can remove and add and subtract drum parts of the drum kit. So you can add more hand percussion sort of things, or take them out, or add more snare and change the style of the snare within the parameters of the drummer that you've chosen. And the drummer that you choose, they've got names and everything, and they play in a certain style on a certain type of kit, and then you can change the kit that they're playing and so on. And there's Kyle, and there's, I can't remember the other names here, Reed, all these names. And my comment is, where are the women? There's only one or two females, and the rest are dudes, But there are, even though it's a ready-made kind of drum track, and, again, it's the sort of place that's good to start with the kids because there's instant success there, but you can get them to change parameters within that drum track. And so they are making musical choices at that point. And then I'm always figuring kids that know how to put together a drum part can do that from scratch. That's a great, really good, that's, what you'd want them to do. But there are some of these parameters. So that XY thing that Dave just mentioned is that type of idea.
It's interesting too, because I find that the more, and I'll call it the kids' music that I listen to.
Not your music?
Well, no. but not, it's interesting how little sort of the layering is really interesting. Often you'll just have, for a verse, you'll literally have a vocal and a drum beat. Maybe a bass will come in, halfway through.
I've saved a number of songs like that in a playlist because I find it really interesting, and I'm totally obsessed with that, breaking songs down to a very acoustic sort of version. And a number of songs at the moment have that kind of acoustic thing going on. Like you said, there is just a singer starts and then there's just a drum track or just a bass line. And I really love that broken down sort of thing where it's not 7 million instruments and they're all playing it, really loud.
And those kids that, might be challenged a little can have that success. It's brilliant that they can, just by manipulating some of those parameters you were talking about with the drummer, or even, having the drummer stop for, the last two beats of the eighth bar. They have that success, and some of the other kids can then, take another step.
And are they adding in addition to the drum part, drums is often the thing that can change the flavour of a song really quickly. So a stem that you might grab, the kids will have in their head what the original song sounds like, and then just by them changing the drum style to something completely different, I find makes a massive change. It's always a good arranging trick to show them how quickly that can change the flavour of a song. If you go from like an EDM style beat to a Latin thing, it just makes the song completely different, and it can be quite funny and amusing. But are they, in addition to doing the drum part, are they adding a bass line afterwards and sort of other harmonic parts like guitar part or keys and stuff like that? And how do they work on that part of it? Are you giving them information about, are they working out themselves the key and the chord progression?
Sure. So essentially I get the kids to work, we'll look at bass lines with the younger kids and we'll look at chord progressions with the older kids, which I suppose makes sense, because, we can be looking at a 1-5-6-4 or, whatever the 1-6-4-5, whatever it's going to be. That's where we can decide how much of the theory we're going to introduce when you've got kids just for a semester, or You've only got the 7s twice a week, but you've got the 10s, 5 times a week. I found that it was really difficult balancing software knowledge with music theory. And we're talking about my music tech class. So, how are kids going to be successful if they're only focusing on the software knowledge and the software theory? When they say, but, Avicii famously, never really listened to his music teacher and was undeniably extremely successful. So it has been about a bit of a struggle, I suppose, to find the right amount of to find that balance. Are we 50% music theory on this remix, and the other 50% we're talking about how to, what we do with that music theory, or is it the other way around? Like, what's motivating the other? Is their understanding of the theory going to limit their understanding of how to do things with the software? So I guess you choose your battles. I'm getting better and better at working out, given, we've only got 4 weeks, say, on this project, of how much music theory will do. For that reason, the class works on the same track. And so if we're all doing, Bruno Mars, we're doing that Mark Ronson song, we're all going to be in D minor. So there's only, that one scary black note to worry about. Then the flat 7, you're okay. And so we can all be living in, D is the king, and F is the queen, and A is the jack, say, I don't know, and D is
I like the terminology.
The tonal center, yeah?
Yeah.
And F is the quality, and so she's very important. It's silly, the analogy, but if you look at a deck of cards, and
I like that.
I call it the hierarchy, right? And it's great because I do this stupid little, I'm holding up my hand to Katie, guys, but I've got my little triad fingers sticking up, and I can show the kids how important it is to have this tonal center. And so if it's D minor, your thumb just lives between those 2 black keys. If you're right-handed, doesn't matter, I suppose. But then they might start introducing this quality of a minor, a minor third, where the F's being used. And then, for stability, they throw in the jack. So D and A, D, F, A, you got the triad. And then suddenly kids are using pads. And rather than, one kid down one end of the room, he and his partner are manipulating the drummer, and they've only got, semi-briefs of a D in different octaves, so D3, D4, and they're moving this D note around, and it's literally, it's not quantized. They're not looking at, when we're moving from this low D up to a high D. They're literally just inputting that note. But they're having a lot of success with that. Whereas some of the other kids then are, dropping in a fifth. Or if you've got those kids that are, holding down a triad, suddenly they can use some of those arpeggiators that are really simple. And the more advanced kids are throwing on extensions. They're doing a D minor 7 and then it's D minor 9. And, the kids that have that extra knowledge from external classes, they're lucky enough to have music lessons.
Yeah.
They can have so much more fun throwing in these extensions and getting different colors, using just, again though, semi-briefs, no worries. There's these synths that come with Logic called Rhythmic, and they're in GarageBand as well, I think. If you go to the synthesizer section, you go to EDM chords, there's rhythmic sort of patches. So if you can hold down a triad and it will play this vamp, this
creates a thing for you. Pattern.
The kids, their minds are just blown the first time they realize it. They're just holding down this silly, it's almost a Star Trek sort of, handshake. They throw it down with whatever fingers, or even chopstick fingers, I call them. Like, however they hold down those 3 keys, their partner might be holding down one of the notes too. But they're having success. But again, it might be sort of a pedal of a D minor sort of pedal. And underneath you've got, D moving down to C, moving down to B flat. Whereas as we go up and up and up through the year levels, like I said, we can move from talking about bass lines, sort of functional bass lines, to chord progressions. And I found this website that's really, really, really fantastic. I've got all my kids to bookmark it, called hooktheory.com.
Yeah, I love Hook Theory. Hook Theory rocks.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Isn't it great? I just finished creating some tutorial videos and a couple of lesson plans inside my online community for it. I've got the whole teacher walkthrough and all the different sections. So for those that haven't seen it, it's a website that has a number of resources on it, but it's kind of like a songwriting website, a resource for songwriting. And it has this interactive software that they've created where you can see a chord progression and a melody going along, and they've set it up so, like, if they take a known song, like let's say Uptown Funk, talking about that one, someone's taken the time to input the chord progression from Uptown Funk, let's say for the verse, and they've put the melody in, and you can see it in that sort of graphic notation format. It's like, coloured blocks on the page, and you can see it, so you can follow the melodic contour. It's really great. But the additional thing is they synchronize it to the YouTube video. So you press play and the video plays at the exact spot, and the software moves through, and you can follow along with the chord progression. You can see the melodic contour going. And the additional thing you can do is actually use the software yourself to create your own chord progressions and melodies and use it as a songwriting tool, and it's just fabulous. And there's a whole nother section called Theory Tab. I'm probably need to do a whole episode on this, but yeah. So how are your students are using it?
Well, because of that website, I think now I'm having a lot more. Well, my kids are having a lot more success with this remixing sort of idea, because they can. If I show, I then get to, I can actually focus on chord progressions that are amazing, chord progressions that are well known, and they're popular for a reason. And if we throw them in Roman numerals and we talk about why on our sort of LMS, or we put them up on the whiteboard, the kids can literally just choose one. I've got 10 in a major key and 10 in a minor key. If we're doing, see a chandelier or something, the kids can grab the fourth one, for example, and they may have very little idea of what that progression is going to sound like. And it might have an inversion in it. I mean, again, then you balance whether or not it's worthwhile talking about,
making it a conscious thing, because sometimes you can leave it there and not actually discuss it and make a big deal out of it. Just go with it. And not sort of stress about it too much. And at some point then later down the track, you might have the time to talk more consciously about it. So.
Yeah, exactly. And this website makes it so easy for you to, because it has the scale degrees, like you said, graphically, so vertically, it'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the notes, because you set the key. But yeah, it'll have the diatonic chords, and you can literally just say, okay, I'll choose chords to be semi-breves. That's nice and easy. So they won't play semi-breves. It does that cool little vamp when it plays them back.
So once you've got your chord progression in there, when you hit play, Hook Theory actually generates an accompaniment pattern for you, and it's a little bit like Imagine. The default one is sort of like Imagine, but you can choose some other options as well. But that's really cool, because even if you put in semi-breves, like you said, it doesn't just go plonk, 2, 3, 4, plonk. It does this cool pattern.
And so if they've chosen the fourth, so I've listed, say, 10 to use in a major key, and they've said, all right, we're going to choose the fourth. They might know what it sounds like because they've played it themselves, or they can input it into this website for free very quickly and press play and listen to it. And if they enjoy those 4 bars, or they might put in a second, 4-bar progression, using the interface is so fantastic and easy.
So easy.
You can even click on a keyboard icon, and it will show you in that key what the notes are.
What it looks like, yep.
Or on a fretboard, it's amazing. But we sort of alt-tab between Hook Theory, showing their progression and their project. And if they choose, even if it's that classic electric piano in GarageBand, but they open up the MIDI editor and hold down Command, so the little, mouse turns into a pencil. They can really quite quickly, because it's drawn in a very similar sort of view as a MIDI editor.
Yes.
It's obviously ascending in pitch, and you've got bar lengths, and they throw in, that progression.
What it looks like. So that's great. That's a direct tool, helping them.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, you can export. If you pay, there's other options. We're only currently using the free option. We're looking at, subscribing as well, but you can export the MIDI data, which is obviously really great. But by not doing that, the kids are learning so much. And I mean, it sounds like something your parents would say, we're not buying that. But you get so much. I've had so much success with the kids have been really successful. Yeah. Just learning, so I go a third above, and then, that major third above that. And now suddenly I've got this chord. And if the vocal's already in their project and I've set it to 106 BPM, they know what the key is. They can listen back to their progression that they chose. And again, it'll be musical and it'll be functional and consonant. But if they don't like it, they can say, well, you know what, this might suit better for the intro where we're not going to have a vocal.
Yeah.
So we'll keep all this work, it's taken us 5 or 10 minutes to put in, these 4 chords, whatever. It's been really valuable because now they're going to just drag that loop to their intro and we'll choose something different. So that's where I feel like I'm getting somewhere with this sort of idea.
That's great.
Teaching the theory in a sort of context that the kids will find engaging because it's a song. And
it's not such a dry approach that you and I probably grew up with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just getting, I'd love to just get back maybe to sort of, finish up this to talk about the rubrics that you work with because, it's something I'm asked a lot and we've touched on it a little bit where, my sort of feeling is in music tech projects, a lot of people say to me, how do you mark, how do you assess a music tech project? And my thing is always, well, what do you want your outcome to be? What's the main thrust of the project? And like you said, it can always combine tech skills. So it might be like, does the student know how to add multiple tracks to a project? Do they know how to set the BPM? Do they know how to do digital signal processing? Do they know how to do automation? Those are all the tech kind of skills. And then alongside that, of course, there's the music theory type skills, like have they added a melody line? Do they have a bass line? Do they have an accompanying part in there? And does it make sense? Is there a chord progression? Are the rhythms, sort of varied? I mean, all of those things can be also part of your rubric. And so, I mean, my theory is it comes down to what is it that you as a teacher want them to get out of the project? What is the thing that you're teaching initially?
Absolutely.
And really, as time goes on, it can become maybe less about the focus might be more on the musical side of things than the tech side of things. But tell me about the rubrics. So for the younger students, so year 7, 8 versus the older students, is there a big shift in what you're using in the rubrics for them?
Yeah, so say my 7s, the rubric, I've just put up their rubric for their remix task. And so we've got an achievement level across the top, emerging through to extending. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, emerging, developing, demonstrating, advancing, and extending. And then below that, we've got the criteria. And I suppose we've tried different approaches where we've got, 8 criteria, and we've been very explicit with exactly what they need to show an understanding of to reach, that sort of level. But it needs to be something that the kids, understand, is written in a way that the kids understand quickly, and that if it's sort of transparent, that they can use the rubric to direct their learning, or at least sort of help them along the way, so that so we've got the criteria at the moment for the year 7 the remix rubric. There's 4 sections. So there's musicality. It's sort of ranging from the project shows little attention to the home key and has no clear sense of tonality, all the way up to this is a highly original piece of music. It uses a variety of musical elements and lots of original created recorded material, unique and interesting sound combinations. And that's for my 7s. I'm expecting those kids to be demonstrating these skills. So right in the middle, for musicality, I've got this is somewhat original but relies heavily on pre-recorded loops and effects. Excuse me. Because a lot of these kids are using this software for the first time. And so they're demonstrating the level I wish them to be at that time, if it might be the first semester of year 7, is that they know how to, layer these pre-recorded loops. But there's some original recorded material. maybe not enough to make it truly original, because there's, that sort of required dependency on the pre-recorded stuff.
But they're showing some sort of sense there. And what about other criteria
sure.
in the list there?
Use of technology is basically the one that I used to help assess or direct their software knowledge. So it's whether or not it's their understanding of a few of the elements of tech that I wanted them to understand. So do they have a sound understanding of things like automation? And for sevens, we're talking, a fade in and a fade out, perhaps, yeah.
Yep.
Like those envelopes can be a little. Some kids understand them instantly. It's it's literally a map for that parameter, and maybe it's the volume, fine, or maybe it's panning and they're ping-ponging sounds in stereo. That's fantastic. But editing, they need to show maybe some audio editing. Also, things like quantizing is really, I find it's something that I need the kids to understand to some extent quickly. And so I've got little projects set up where I'll give them an unquantized beat.
Excellent.
And we can spend time actually fixing that. And I think a mate at work actually set up a project of Smoke on the Water with MIDI guitars, and it sounds terrible. And these out-of-time drums. It's just sort of 8 bars of that riff. But yeah, it's completely out of time. And so the kids need to show their understanding of quantizing, whether they're manually dragging that snare across to the third beat of the bar, or they're selecting and quantizing to the nearest.
Do you get them
16th.
to do it manually first, and then you go, by the way, there's this button?
It's a real.
I think that's kind of cool to do that way.
Absolutely, but I find that quantizing is such a beast.
And I feel like because I don't know, maybe for drum parts, but you just don't want everything in your project quantized, because it just sounds too mechanical, and it's a very it's a matter of taste on how much quantizing to make it secure from a musical rhythmic point of view versus it now sounds just way too mechanical and not human at all. And
the senior school kids, they really want to have that. Sometimes the kids that are really into sort of hip hop want to have that drunken drum sort of
drunken
drums. That sort of set top-lity,
yeah,
sitting behind the beat sort of feel. So, and again, I mean, you can actually use quantizing to show how to play some couplets or something to have that feel. But then you've got kids who still don't understand why is it called quarter?
Yeah,
why are we moving these to the closest quarter? I don't know. If you're in 3/4 and you're talking about quarter notes again, there's all that sort of.
yeah.
So it's been really, I suppose, challenging to work out at what year do the kids need to have this understanding of a concept like quantizing.
Yeah. Because
it's such an animal, and it can be a real friend that can really destroy a track too. So especially if they don't understand, why am I moving it to a 16th? How accurately did you play that phrase? So it's quantizing, I suppose, is one of my sort of.
It's a hard one.
It's a love-hate relationship with my classes, I suppose. Because
I think so
and
too.
Sort of,
even adults have trouble understanding it too, like choosing, because I find that the best, you get a lot of success out of quantizing if you can picture kind of from a notation point of view what it is. So if you play something in and as a musician that you've played 16th notes as your smallest value, then that's what you'll choose in the quantizing drop-down menu. But if you don't have that knowledge and you don't know, and then you go ahead and choose to quantize to 8th notes, it's going to totally mess up what you've played in. You can undo, it's okay. But, you kind of need to have that understanding that that's what you've played in the first place But then, you can experiment as well. You can just pick and see what happens with different settings and see how it goes. But, you kind of need a little bit of knowledge too. So, so it can be a super interesting thing. So anything else you want to add with the rubric? Yeah.
Use of tech. And then just two more. So this is just for my sevens, but then I've got a criteria on organisation and structure. How they've structured the work, how they've sort of organised the form. because I find it's really important that the kids have a really good understanding of sort of how boring we can be with Western music and our groups of 4 and 8, and why we're so comfortable with that. Obviously, the last thing I want to do is want to limit them, but they need some constraints. And so sometimes I actually call them constraints, and whether or not they've used groups of 4s and 8s or 16s, whatever it is, to show that understanding. Because, if things are thrown in randomly, they may sound quite random.
Yeah. They can be good at some points and not always.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so it's kind of, again, if it's transparent, the kids know why they need to sort of, why I have these sort of strict sort of criteria. It's helping them develop this understanding of form, and they're looking at it while they're working on the project. So it's not a shock, when they get their result, that they weren't allowed to have, that 13 and a half bars, banjo. And then finally time management, which is just a classroom one, I suppose. How sort of, how focused and effective their sort of use of time was.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And how different does it get with the older students for their rubric? Is it more detailed, broken down?
The 10s especially. I mean, for the year 10, sometimes I'll have one of their sax is a timed remix where I'll give them 80 minutes to come up with something. I'll give them a vocal that they won't know what it is until they open the sack. But
that's fabulous.
It's kind of fun. There's a great YouTube channel called Fact Magazine, and they have these little challenges called Against the Clock.
I think I've heard about that, because do they get other YouTube artists to join in, or am I thinking of something else? There might be another thing as well, but
they get sort of basically producers, not like bedroom producers necessarily. They get some really big names. But they only give them 10 minutes, and it's so fantastic because they don't care what DAW, is being used, and they have multiple cameras. So you might be looking at, someone using Ableton, and then you might, find someone using, Logic or whatever. That's fine, because obviously that every DAW
doesn't matter which tool you're onto.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And it's really important for kids to understand that, because some of them will say, my kid's at this school and they do this because they're using this software.
And it's not about the software.
No, it's not.
It's totally not.
All of them are so similar. Anyway, so I sort of stole the idea from that YouTube channel where they get these producers to sort of come up with something in 10 minutes. I get my kids at 10, one of their sax in year 10 is, a timed remix, I call it, or a timed composition. And I might have, again, I use that word constraints, where they need to show, rhythmic displacement. They need to show this sort of, level of understanding of automation. We're not doing fade-ins at year 10, but they need to be able to change the resonance, on this filter or things like that. Again, it's kind of, I need to spoon feed the kids a little with what I need them to show, but it's a really nice way for them to work towards getting something sounding, sort of semi-professional, something that they're really proud of.
Fabulous.
So the rubrics just become far more detailed, I suppose. And I sometimes give them a sheet that I'll print out. They'll say, you need to show this. It needs to be 90 seconds, for example.
Yeah.
You need to, maintain the tonality throughout. There's, zero dissonance. You're not allowed to use a single, obviously if it's musical, but then I suppose that's a whole other argument whether or not, using that note was musical or not. But they sort of just become more detailed, I suppose, with the seniors.
Yeah, fabulous. That's great. And I think we may try and upload a copy of a couple of rubrics if you're willing to share. I'll add them to the show notes. That would be really useful for people, I think, to just see. Everyone loves to see what everyone else is doing. It's great to get ideas from other teachers, so that would be super useful. Wow, we've covered so much today. Thank you so much for sharing what you've been doing. I think it's a great topic. It's a lot of fun remixing, and I find it's the sort of thing that if I had spare time, I'd love to just sit and play. And I think as a teacher, it's so useful to do it yourself before or alongside the kids. I mean, I had someone else on the podcast, Richard McCready, who I think he does things alongside his kids in class. So he will create his own version of the project. So he's doing it in real time with the kids. And I think it's great as teachers and musicians to just have a go yourself and see what the students are going to come up against and not just sort of say go for it without having tried it. Great experience.
I do the same, but I've got a real problem with maybe rambling because I have so much fun if you're setting up the class that, you know, the intention of that class is, you know, maybe it's getting in that minor 7 chord you're dealing with some sort of older kids, or, you know, inputting the info from hook theory into your project. But you can get so sort of
carried away.
Suddenly you look at the clock and think, I did that for 15 minutes.
I know.
45 minutes. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
But doing it alongside the kids, absolutely. And they can see you make mistakes. They can see you make
It's not going to be perfect. Decisions. Yeah.
How often you can quickly, you know, when you're rushing because they're supposed to be working and you've rambled, you can throw in a loop that will either, you know, absolutely destroy those 8 bars and kill the vibe completely, or take it somewhere else.
Really cool.
You know, you see the eyebrows move and, hey, Mr. B, what was that loop? I'm just going to steal that loop. You know, they run to their browser and suddenly, everyone's using.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. I love what you're doing, and it's been great to catch up. And Dave's just finishing off. I was going to say the last couple of days of holidays. Not true. You told me that you have another whole week. So our independent schools in Australia, we have a holiday at this time of year, which is 2 weeks for most people, but a lot of the independent schools have 3 weeks because students like to go skiing in Europe and things. And not even kidding. So yes, my kids are going back to school in a couple of days. But anyway, so thanks so much for chatting today. And I'll look forward to, I'll upload those things. I'll put the links on the website for the things that we've mentioned today. And it's been great.
Before I go, that Jacob Collier thing.
Oh, yeah.
I've just got to tell you, there's a guy called June Lee.
Oh, yeah. He's analysis. Oh, my gosh. I've seen it.
He transcribes all of Jacob's stuff.
He's also crazy.
And he understands that when he modulates that sort of, when he changes from A440, he can hear it because his perfect pitch is so, you know.
Crazy.
Crazy as well. Yeah. But he's just finished his transcription of, which one was it? Is it Close to You? I think it's Close to You. So there's a brand one went up like 2 days ago.
I'm going to look for it.
Got to tell Katie.
This is the problem. Once you start watching those Jacob Collier videos, that's like, total rabbit hole. And June Lee, who I think is at, I think Jacob Collier did like a couple of weeks was it Berkeley or MIT somewhere anyway, and I think June Lee was a student there. Anyway, I'm just guessing their relationship and how they got onto each other. But June Lee, this guy, he does all these transcriptions of Jacob's stuff, which is amazing. So you can find his channel, open up one of his videos, and you can see the notation and listen to Jacob singing, which is really cool. It's like a score reduction type scenario, but it's super cool watching along with it because you're just like, how is he going to transcribe? Oh my gosh. He did.
Yep, absolutely.
Another great skill. Fabulous. All right, I'll link to that as well. All right. Thanks so much, Dave.
Pleasure. Thank you.
That's it for today's show. If you'd like more help with running remixing and other composition projects with your students, you can join me inside the Midnight Music community where we have lesson plans, courses, video tutorials and lots of other resources. For more information about the community and a special offer for podcast listeners, go to midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. The Music Tech Teacher podcast is hosted by me, Katie Wardrobe. You can find more information and links from today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/61. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.